it's a time of changes. Now is the time to move on. This is the time for solutions. Feel the motion. Be new is born. Me and me, none of you. Now I'm connected to you. Me and me, none of you. Me and you will do it for you. This is the time for solutions. Be new is for you.
Buenos días, buen día, bienvenidos a la Barcelona New Economy Week, el evento híbrido, global y empresarial más singular de Barcelona. Desde hoy y hasta el viernes vamos a estar aquí más de 800 speakers, 17.000 asistentes y personas de 145 países que se darán cita en este evento internacional, que tiene la vista puesta en el futuro, en el crecimiento económico, pero sobre todo en la nueva economía. Este año el BNIU redobla su apuesta. Si el año pasado se centraba en torno a 5 grandes sectores, este año añade 5 más. Y una de las novedades es el plató de televisión donde nos encontramos ahora, este B-Sustainability, que como su nombre indica, vamos a hablar de sostenibilidad. Nos encontramos en el edificio del Roca Gallery Barcelona, un edificio maravilloso. La verdad es que los que han venido hasta aquí han podido ya gozar de él, los que están siguiendo pues, estas ponencias desde sus casas o desde sus oficinas, pues les vamos a dar un poco de envidia y les invitamos a que en cualquier momento puedan acercarse a Barcelona a visitar este edificio. Una fachada hecha de cristales, espejos que evocan el agua, y es que el agua va a ser justamente una también de las grandes temáticas que vamos a abordar en este espacio. Esta semana este plató va a albergar debates y ponencias con la sostenibilidad como marco. El BNIU apuesta por el crecimiento económico, pero este crecimiento tiene que ir de la mano de la ecología, de la mano de la sostenibilidad, de la reducción de emisiones. Y es que es importante el planeta que les vamos a dejar a nuestros hijos. Este primer panel le hemos titulado BEFFICIENT, liderazgo en energía y diseño ambiental. Y queremos centrarnos en los edificios, en las paredes que nos albergan, ya sean las de nuestras casas o las de nuestras oficinas. Y es que cuanto más ecológico y más sostenible es este edificio, mejor para el medio ambiente, pero está demostrado que también mejor para nosotros, nos sentimos mejor. Les voy a dar un dato. Se calcula que el 50% de la energía que consumimos en Europa se debe a la edificación, y esto baja hasta el 40% cuando hablamos de Estados Unidos. Solo con estos datos ya es importante hablar de construcciones. Y otra cosa que les voy a contar. ¿Saben dónde está el edificio más ecológico y inteligente del mundo? Pues se encuentra en Ámsterdam y se llama The Edge. Es un edificio que produce toda la energía que consume, que tiene luz natural, que recoge las aguas pluviales y está considerado el más ecológico, el más verde y el más sostenible. No sé si los ponentes que nos acompañan estarán de acuerdo con esta afirmación. Ellos son los expertos y lo dirán, pero yo sin más preámbulos paso a presentarles a la moderadora. Es Amaya Celaya Álvarez. Ella es experta, buenos días, experta en resiliencia urbana y soluciones basadas en la naturaleza. Es coordinadora técnica del programa Urban Resilience de ONU Habitat. Amaya, todo tuyo y tus ponentes, y aquí estaremos expectantes y escuchando las aportaciones que haréis.
Hola, buenos días. Vamos a hacer esta sesión en inglés. I will begin by presenting my colleagues here that are going to have a fruitful dialogue with me about Be Efficient. Ignacy Cubiñá. He is president and co-founder of Eco-Intelligent Growth, a consultancy dedicated to implementing the circular economy cradle-to-cradle in industries and regions since 2005. As a reference on the subject, he is a member of the management committee of Grupo Construcía, and he directs the innovation to develop methodologies and tools that accelerate the circular transformation and facilitate the taking of directions in different environments. Welcome, Ignacy.
Thank you.
Kai Kilman, that is leading the GBCI Europe, the premier sustainability certification and credentialing organization in the region. Mr. Kilman has 2 decades of international experience as a consulting architect and non-profit leader, and is the co-founder of the German Green Building Association. He advocates for sustainable benchmarking and performance monitoring using programs such as LEED and its technology platform, ARC. Welcome, Kai.
Thank you.
And Manuel, he is an industrial engineer, expert in facility management and maintenance, president of the FM Association in Catalonia. Associació Catalana de Facility Management, and part of the executive committee of IAM, Spanish Maintenance Association. He is also member of the board of directors of ISA Spain, International Society of Automation, and he currently works at Schneider Electric as Southern Europe Tender Director in the process automation business.
Thank you, Manuel.
Welcome, Manuel. We are here to talk mainly about being efficient. Our main question in this panel would be, does quality renovation have a strong business case? And we will be having some dialogue through some questions that we have prepared all together. Just some figures to begin. As Gisela was explaining, buildings consume around 45% of total energy in the world. In Europe, 75% of European buildings are energy inefficient. And between the 70% and the 90% of existing buildings will be under use by 2050. Both public and private buildings must be renovated at a rate of 2–3% per year. And the average in Europe now is 1. Since the previous update in April 2021, OECD countries and key partners economies have increased public spending on green economy measures to $677 billion, up from $336 billion. While this is welcome news, it's enough to have the transformational effects needed to address environmental crises while building back a more inclusive economy? Not quite. This one-off increase amounts to only 21% of the total sums allocated to COVID-19 economic recovery. This means that 79% of this funding either does not consider environmental dimensions or worse, reverses progresses on some of them. So again, does quality renovation have a strong business case? Ignacy, do you think that the quality renovation case address climate change from a strategy of low cost and with potential energy savings that allow the investment to be amortized from the circular economy perspective?
Okay. Well, I think there's a previous question whether quality is a good business case. So I will start with this one. I think quality in the 21st century needs to build up a new business case. So we need to promote quality at all different levels. When you talk about buildings and the building environment, you're not just talking about a space and the destination place of the building. You're talking about a whole ecosystem. So what we need is to build up a business case and incentives for the whole ecosystem to make things happen. And when you talk about efficiency and energy, this is not the only parameter to look at. Indeed, I think energy is probably the easiest one. I think when we talk about resource management in general, it's much more challenging. And when you talk about reduction of emissions, I think a lot of people is putting the focus on greenhouse emission reduction, which is a liability. And this is why, well, especially investors, they are looking at this as a risk prevention type of strategy. What I would suggest, and from a cradle-to-cradle perspective, what we talk is not just about risk management. We talk about how we design for abundance. And one of the ideas to build up abundance and not scarcity is because the only way to make our wall and quality affordable is when you really create abundance in the first place. So I think what we need is a blueprint to create abundance instead of scarcity all along the system.
Kai?
I think fundamentally quality is a good thing. So, but what has changed within the entire industry is that we have added new components into the quality, and these are like the sustainability, the health and well-being. Especially COVID showed all of a sudden that we need to focus more on quality of air ventilation, as an example, and that's something where the entire real estate industry, they need to learn this. Real estate is typically very slow and conservative, but over the last 10, 20 years, sustainability all of a sudden had made its way in. And now finally we have other segments like financial components, where a lender, a bank investor wants to see proof of sustainability of meeting certain quality points. The same is then for reporting, environmental social governance, ESG reporting. And then the numbers you mentioned at the beginning, the European Commission came out with this mechanism of the Green Deal and the taxonomy, and they especially address these. The renovation wave is we have 1% of renovation. This is nothing. You know, the energy inefficiency that the retail or the real estate stock in Europe has, it's bad. So, and we need to do something to get out of these 3/4 of all assets are not efficient enough. Otherwise, yes, they're going to strand. We're talking about decarbonization, and that ties in at the new construction and during the life cycle of the operation. So that's why this quality is always good, but we need to find ways to prove it and then tie these new legal and financial components in to make our real estate, let it be a building or a community, a city, more resilient for events, let it be storm or climate events, but also financial risk events. So this is this whole discussion, resiliency, what does it mean?
And Manuel, how this reflect on facility management services and businesses?
Well, facility managers should be from the beginning of the project in order to ensure the quality, because the professional who knows how it's going to be the behavior of the people inside of the sites, and I would like to say sites, not buildings, is the facility manager. For that reason, to ensure the quality, we need the facility manager from the beginning. The other important point that I want to point out, that is, for example, in our country, it's not enough well done, is the commissioning phase. You need, every time that you are building something, you need to set up a very good commissioning, because with COVID, we found a lot of surprises that buildings theoretically designed to have the enough renovation of the air at the end were not compliant. For that reason, facility managers should be in the core of the team from the beginning to be able to set up the new process in the right way.
So for the climate resilience perspective related to buildings renovation, we should go from scarcity to abundance. We should monitor and report and be sure that every action and measure that we propose in buildings can be measured and reported, and we have to count on facility managers from the beginning.
Well, that's exactly what he said is true, that once a building is built new, it enters its life cycle. And that can be 30 to 100 years in Europe, longer, older buildings. And this value of a well-organized asset or property manager together with the facility manager becomes key, but also the role has changed. A facility manager also, they need to understand, constant performance of a building. You pay your monthly energy bill in an office building, but then the bank wants to see this. What is your performance of the building over the entire year, next year? Because they give you different types of financing, green bonds as an example. So that's why this whole service industry has changed and has adopted, had to adopt new services, financial components as an example.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to cities, when we go beyond the built environment of a building isolated and we need to regenerate a city that it's already built, what about not only design and construction, but the entire range of professional training to be covered, and everything that has to do with technological innovation and digitalization and so on and so forth? Ignacy?
Well, that's why we talk about an ecosystem, full ecosystem. That's why we are inspired by nature. I mean, the first thing that nature does is that there's no waste in nature. And everything is being operated by clean energy and renewable energy. But at the end of the day, what really counts on a biological system is when you can celebrate diversity. And the most important thing about cities is when you celebrate diversity. So diversity is it's not just about biological diversity, it's about cultural and conceptual diversity. So it's about talent creation, talent attraction, and talent retention, but it's also about building different type of relationships. I think the key thing about the circular economy, a lot of people think about circular economy as, okay, this is the new stage of recycling. It goes far beyond that. The main goal of circular economy is building new relationships. And I think, a lot of people is a little bit scarce about it, the fact that in less than 20 years, probably 60–70% of the whole population will be living in cities. This could be a threat, but it's also a big opportunity, because the city as itself can be the core of building a human ecosystem. So we need to build the new relationships as a new network that starts with the quality definition and keeps on evolving by itself depending on, well, the different roles and rules that will be established in the system. Our role as designers is just giving the guidance and providing the guidelines to make things happen.
I really like what Ignacio said. This circular economy has two angles. One is almost the philosophical, it's something new for the entire society. And the other one, if we're talking real estate, primarily they talk about sourcing materials, reusing, recycling, and changing the entire procurement process because materials are finite. We don't have everything for the eternity. So that's where we have to shift, fast-growing materials or using these more organic materials. So, but the other component I thought I want to touch on is, yes, educating the entire society. College degrees that are offered right now will probably fade out, or we have to have new degrees that touch on all these things. We as society need to learn how to live different. And as I said, yeah, people will move more into cities. There's huge opportunities, and the real estate, the investment industry needs to understand just changing one building and making it super nice and energy efficient doesn't really have an impact or change the entire community where different levels of poverty exist, education rate exists. So that's why we need to engage the entire community from education, but also building. When I invest 50 billion in a building, then I have some leverage. I can change. I can bring in public transportation that enables people to commute to work or to have access to other things. So taking the bigger picture, I think that's the next step. Out of one building, projecting it to the entire community or a city. And that is possible. There are so many mayors or communities that have programs that be just for energy, but they measure air rates, all these things. So that exists, but I think the job is to combine this, also to educate everybody. I think with COVID, we were aware how vulnerable we all are. All of a sudden we are restricted. We can't even leave our house. So I think that is a little eye-opener for everybody, a big one.
And beyond the ecosystem that Ignacio was mentioning, the 50% of people in Europe live in poverty related to energy. So if we are really able to change not only the buildings but the entire ecosystem of the city, we will support not only the planet but the people that are living in the planet. And I think that innovation and digitalization could help this process. Manuel?
Thank you for the question, because I love digitalization. I'm working every day on that, and it's a strong tool. It's a tool. The digitalization is not a goal. It's a tool to be able to find the challenge and solve the challenge that we have. For example, you mentioned smart cities. Cities should be smart cities in the future in order to help the experience of the people. And for that reason, you need digitalization. Digitalization technology is increasing, but we need to implement the digitalization in the right way and to select the priorities. For example, right now, we have in the water networks a big amount of leakage. I was participating in one smart city project on this August, a big leakage of water. Let's start with this in order to really implement the circular economy, and with this to grow and real platforms to engage and to set up the right experience for the cities and for the citizens. The challenge that it could be for this is regarding digitalization is the career paths, the learning, etc. Here we have a problem. We are losing in the market that we are not finding the right profiles in the people, and we need to look at it from the both parts, the parts of the education for the people who is doing the maintenance, and the part of the education for people who is doing the management. For that reason, for digitalization, training, learning is going to be a big challenge too, and we need to address.
So advocacy to change the entire planet, and education and training to go for the good profiles that help the buildings and the cities
Yeah,
to change the situation.
Yeah, we need this together, you know. Education and innovation goes together. Well-educated people, they come up with new ideas. And sometimes times that are risky, that drive innovation out of fear or out of the search for some new solutions. And we have seen in the real estate industry that there are many startups that coming up with an air sensors here or this measurement tools there. And what Emmanuel just said, there are so many, you can collect thousands of data points. You don't necessarily need all of them, but you need to be able to structure that and find the right mechanism to communicate this for reporting or for the investor or the tenants in the building. When you walk in and say, this building has consumed that much kilowatt hours yesterday, then you raise awareness and people respond to this, you know. So I think that is key innovation, and it needs to go.
Yeah, I think innovation is key, and innovation is what is really driving the change here, especially for the young generation. You know, I mean, they feel attracted by innovation, and they want to be challenged. The problem is for most of them is, okay, but what is the scenario for this challenging? I mean, what is the playground? I mean, who is defining the playing field? I think one of the things we can contribute to the next generation and generations to come is by defining some different scenarios. One of the scenarios, when you talk about management and facility management, and you talk about data and data sharing, I mean, I like this Einstein quote where he said, okay, I know physics and chemistry, but biology is the magic. You know, data is the same thing. It's not about big data management, it's about quality data management. And one of the biggest challenges we are facing, for instance, we are developing buildings as material banks, and we are one of the first companies in the world to be developing circular building material passports. You know what the biggest challenge is? It's not the amount of energy the building is going to consume. It's not the amount of water, because we have meters for that. The biggest challenge is, okay, what is in the product? I mean, what is in the product? What is in the machine? What is in, I mean, what are the constituents of the components of this building as a material bank? And why we don't have this information? Because the industry is not used to share it, because they never found an incentive to do that. So here's where we are, to build up these kind of incentives.
And that's the other key point, transparency. You know, so many things, oh, this is a green building, but what's the benchmark? Against what do you compare it? And then, yeah, be transparent. Why is that green? And that goes throughout everything. For a bank that needs to know exactly why should we invest here and give you a preferred rate, to the end user. Tell me, when I'm going to work the next 5 years in this building, is it a healthy building? So being transparent. It's like when you go shopping, you want to see on your box what are the ingredients of a building. We have the same thing on the building level. It's just this awareness for a person, an employee is not there yet, but we are going there. And employees becoming more picky and selective. It's not like in the old days you would work 20 years for one employee. Young people, they are innovative. They are sometimes easily bored, and they move on. They look for opportunities, and of course, the best employers attract the best talent. You know, you have to give something in the market, especially in Europe right now, where we have an employee-driven market, so they can be selective.
Yes,
I like what you mentioned about the benchmark, because this is a point that we realized that still benchmark needs to be improved, because when I was investigating about benchmark of cost of buildings around, it's not still well addressed. We need to work more as companies, as association institutions, to try to find a benchmark in order to be able to compare buildings, because this is a point that it still needs improvement to be able to go on.
This is somehow...
So to get the transparency that I think is one of the lack of some of transparency is behind some of the figures I was given at the beginning as for green investment from the OECD. So to get this transparency and to give the young people some faith in our system, we need not only to know how to use data, but to design indicators and data that are smart data, not big data, beyond smart, beyond big, yes, to be able to understand how really building is working and how we are going to go for better buildings in the future. And it links to my next question that has to do with health. You know that we are living still in the COVID situation. So when we talk of buildings with the people that are not experts on the matter, beyond the energy savings, water savings, material savings, so resource savings, they think in their health. And I think, yes, private space and buildings could and should improve the health and, why not, the productivity of the people. Yes, Ignacy?
Well, we define circularity, we always say safe then circular, not the other way around. So we start with safety. And why we start with safety? Because safety builds trust and builds confidence. So when you can build trust and you build confidence, the system works. Otherwise, you are working against the system. So this is a very important thing. The second thing is about the COVID and the whole thing. The thing is about, okay, what does it mean human health against environmental health? What we need is a blueprint for both human health and environmental health, not trade-offs between the human health and the environmental health, because we're talking about the health of the planet. And one of the things about the COVID, what we don't know the source of the COVID, apparently, is that we have a lot of uncertainties in the system. So we need to build things for good, so with the right benchmarks, from scratch. And we need to do this in a way that the system can replicate and can escalate by itself. So when you talk about health, for instance, when we talk about air quality, which is, by the way, one of the focus on a cradle-to-cradle inspired building, we are not just focused on how many air renovations you need in the building, because air renovations, they come with an energy bill, right? So we talk also about, non-emitting materials. Just to give you an example, this summer, there was a kind of big controversy in the United States, because apparently the EPA was heading a report talking about high emission volatile organic compounds related to timber structures and structural materials in general, that they were many times above the threshold level. So this is the kind of information we need to have, and we also need to have it from the industry. I don't see a threat for the industry. I see a big opportunity.
About well-being and health?
Health and well-being, yes. So the industry over the last 10, 15 years thought, we need to tackle this energy or the environmental component, what Ignacio said. And now all of a sudden came more obvious, especially during the COVID, we had to address these social components. These are part of this environmental social governance, ESG. And now the industry, yes, is looking for, we think we have solved we can somehow benchmark environmental things, but we still don't really know how to address social things. And same discussion as we had overlooking an verification system, a global one. You can measure productivity, you can measure sick days of employees and improve your environment. So these are the key criteria that slowly flow in an assessment, but the industry is still shy, and we're currently at this point connecting environmental and social. In the past, we at least had talked about clean water. So now all of a sudden, during COVID, we talked about fresh and clean air. Before, normal people wouldn't really talk about what's the filtration rate. So and that's where we get to the next level, and of course it takes again education. The system lead that we are verifying on global stage has an urban tool. It's called Lead for Cities and Communities, and they have an entire category dedicated to quality of life. This addresses not just social housing, but also resilience and management in the event of catastrophes. So that's where we slowly see that investors, but also clients, look for these S category, where you can put social in it. For the Spanish market, the big development in Madrid Nuevo Norte, has just passed LEED pre-certification for the entire new development gold level. It's only the second one in entire Europe. So that's where big developer, but also municipalities looking for this and making sure they plan for the future. But this is key that the social components is embedded. It needs to be a holistic thing, not just energy. Energy by itself is not environmental. You need to trash, water, and then all the other things that come along.
Well, I remember we did a survey some 2 years ago. And for the main concern for facility manager was energy savings. Now, after COVID, there's different story. No. But it's not only about health, it's even about well-being, as you mentioned. No? We are advancing so quick here, starting to do our workplaces, helping the people to feel comfortable in the work. And even, it's necessary now to choose the people to come back to the office, because we are in the process to come back to the office. If the people is coming back to the office, they need to come back to a site that they are comfortable and they are quiet. How would we can implement this? Our suggestion always is to implement KPIs in the scoreboard. You need some surveys about the satisfaction of the people who are in the building. You need to measure the emissions, you need to measure the energy to be able to control, in order to understand how is the status of your building, in order to implement new actions, because this is never-ending story. You are always working on that.
So, so the future of the measurement systems and validation systems would be perhaps taking into consideration not only the characteristics of the building itself, but also the end user that live and produce in the building. This is quite interesting.
Experience.
This feedback is important. This constant surveys, performance approach, even with the tenant, give us a feedback. You know, I'm too cold, I'm too hot. So that's the responsibility, and also with this change of work culture. After coming out of COVID, probably half I'm going to stay half the week in home office, going back to the office. How do I manage this? You know, there are going to be complete different models. And yeah, what Emmanuel said, people need to feel safe and secure. If I walk in, that I don't need to have my 5'2" meters difference, that I can work there and don't get sick again. So this subconsciously, people start dealing different. I've seen people wearing double masks, you know, so people don't feel safe. No?
So we need data about and indicators about buildings construction, about end user behavior, and also, and according to your words, Ignacy, about materials and the producers should facilitate better and more transparent information for us, the designers and builders, being able to use properly the materials that they are producing. Also, that beyond energy and after the COVID, we are touching several sustainable development goals. Of course, the 3, that is health and well-being. Water, because we are here mainly talking of energy, but water is one of the scarcest resources we have so far. 7, energy, 9, infrastructure, in which we have, of course, the buildings and the need of renovation. 11, that it's about cities, and 13, 14, 15, that are the ones mainly related to climate. So we are touching a lot of SDGs beyond the SDG related to energy. And it links to my next question. I think we have a couple of them more, because we are talking mainly about energy. But I want to delve into the resources scheme and talk also about water or materials. So what we could offer to society from this perspective, Ignacy.
Well, I will start to make a remark about SDGs. I think we should tackle all these 17 SDGs. I think the built environment has the potential to do that. For instance, let's talk about poverty. When you talk about poverty, you talk about energy poverty, resource poverty, water poverty, scarcity. This is a key goal. I mean, this is the goal of our lives, you know. So when we talk about buildings and what is the impact of buildings, we need to design, run, and define the next use of buildings. in the cradle-to-cradle world, we don't talk about life cycle. We talk about use cycle. Because most of the things in the building are not living things, by the way. So we always think about the next use of the building. So we talk about the usability of the building and what it is in the building. By defining usability in a different way, we are also tackling poverty. Because in the end of the day, we are living in a wasteful society. I mean, basically, I was just watching, it was from 2018. The guy was talking at the United Nations, and the guy who was talking about it was the guy who was setting the SDGs definition, right? Can't remember his name now. He was very emphatic, but there was one thing that really picked me up very quickly. He said, 50% of all the money in the world has no value. 50%. He said either is interest rate 0 or negative interest rate. So we are putting a lot of money, energy, and resources in 50% of useless system. So what we need is a 100% useful system that is much less costly than what we're running now, because the main operational cost of our operating system is waste. Either energy waste, water waste, or material waste. So you will never fix it up if you don't fix up this very fundamental principle.
I think this poverty discussion and how to tie in real estate is really on the global level. If you take the region of Europe, then I think we are a very rich region if you compare them with Africa or Asia. So I think that ties into this north-south discussion and how can we influence this. As a global system, we're trying to overlay set standards throughout the world. And we know this is only punctual. But I think this is the shift, and you need organizations that have the financial background. Also, you need legal framework. But a legal framework that works well in an advanced Sweden might not work well in a country in Africa yet, you know? So that's why I need some stimulation. And that's where we need the financial input from very often commercial investors to drive this to a certain extent to the greater good. And many have understood that it is possible. So that's the way then how we could shift, you know. Otherwise, we're going to see more and more refugees from war, poverty-driven, not even enough to eat. And then we had the Syria example years ago. Afghanistan now is picking up again, and that will not stop. We have the wars in Africa based on religious different beliefs. And I think fighting poverty and establishing equality to a certain extent, at least going this direction, making everybody aware of it, real estate has a lot of influence that. It's just that investors need to think outside their own building, what can I do for the community around my building? You know, so I think that's the next step. And we do see organizations doing that. And of course, you have commercial, have a different financial background than a municipality. But innovative municipality can push this. And then we, to a certain extent, rely on legal frameworks from the European level, the European Commission, on a national level, and globally, of course, the SDGs, how can they be addressed? More than just a framework.
I think we are not doing enough things. We are still long road. But there are starting to be good news. Because in the share market, companies who are sustainable than with a very good footprint are more appreciated in the share market. This is a good point, because the investors are investing in this type of companies. Even companies working in, let me say, old economy are moving very quickly, like oil and gas companies, to new type of footprint with more renewable energies, etc., etc. For that reason, I think this is a really important trend that is going to help a lot worldwide to improve our sustainability in the companies. And if the end in the companies is doing this, I think governments is starting to think. I have some contacts with, for example, Panama, South America, and countries are starting to think about it. For that reason, it's not enough. We need to speed up, but at least we have some good news.
No, but that's exactly what he said. Just because I feel good, not everybody does. There are some innovators, but if the financial question kicks in, and then also the reputation. When was it? A couple of years ago, BlackRock said we are pulling out of fossil investments. You know, this slowly starts to trigger, and when stakeholders ask, "Oh, where are we actually investing in military equipment, all these things?" Then we see a shift.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that will help more than just regulation. Sometimes financial loss hurt more than just, you know, being afraid of things. So this helps a lot.
A lot.
So inclusiveness, including in this concept, planet and people, is leading somehow this SDG log frame, and with this mantra of leaving no one behind at the end of the day that we repeat once and again, and with the other mantra that you can find also in the resilience plan in Spain, that is do no harm. So between leaving no one behind and do no harm, that is something that I think is our duty with the renovation of buildings and new buildings. We need to go beyond our own barriers that we are encountering now. I will go for the last question, and it links with your final remark about the legal framework. We have now several frameworks working about green. Hopefully, we are not going to go for a greenwashing again. And we have, of course, labels and benchmarks. What for you is the framework that could really lead us to allow me to be a bit ambitious for a better world? If there is any.
I think defining a framework as a kind of a scheme program type of thing, this is a little bit of, it's a little bit too tricky, you know? I remember when I started our activity, we embraced lead, because we embraced the leadership concept, because lead came from the private sector. So we said, okay, that's a good framework. But our idea was, okay, how we can develop the cradle-to-cradle philosophy, how we can develop a cradle-to-cradle vision, and what kind of frameworks we can embrace. That was a pre-competitive scenario. So today is much more competitive. We have even the European Commission talking about the levels, new framework, talking about cradle-to-cradle vision of buildings and the real estate. I think the most important thing, and this is something we have learned, for instance, in the cradle-to-cradle wall, because cradle-to-cradle is also a product certification scheme, is that we need flexibility at the bottom line. That means we need liquidity between the different frameworks. So we need to have common KPIs and common ways of measuring things, whatever the framework is going to be. So in my opinion, I think all those frameworks, they have very positive contributions. The thing is, okay, if I would like to make an ideal building, should I use one framework, combination of all of them? Probably the smartest way will be a combination of all of them, you know? And if you cannot do that, because sometimes you need a lot of paperwork to be done, by the way, and well, at least let's decide what your personal KPIs and where the KPIs of the project are, you know? So you can make a combination. And by the way, don't forget the performance of things. That's why, for instance, when they talk about, in circular economy comes from the performance economy idea. So we need things that perform the way they were designed for. So I leave it to my colleagues.
No, yeah, and I think that is the perfect lead over. Like, we are moving now into performance frameworks, and from our point of view, the first LEED certified buildings were certified 2000. So this is now 20 years ago, and the reason why LEED was created, the industry looked for something, a benchmark they could compare and benchmark them. So now over the time, these frameworks, of course, need to evolve. And right now, we are at the point where we're using digitalization, a digital platform called ARC in the backend, to constant measure the performance. Nowadays, with innovation digitalization, things should be open. An open platform where you can put in a blue framework, a green framework, whatever you want in LEED, BREEAM, DG, but the outcome on the key performance indicators, KPIs, that's, I think, required. But there we need to have a certain structure, because an investor is not necessarily an engineer. They don't really know what blue, red,
Yeah.
and green works, you know. So that's where, on the overall setting, and in Europe, European Commission probably, that should be underlaid in the Green Deal or taxonomy and more specified. That's why the transparency comes back in. You know, what are you reporting? You know, that we have the same mechanism of comparing. And we don't need to collect everything, but some key performance indicator. And that's where I think we are going, what are the investment requirements, the reporting requirements, and make these a bit more structured and binding, not too open, because then there are always people going around and find, hey, that meets the criteria. So, but at the end, right now, it's performance-based, where the existing building performance ongoing is key. When you build new, you create a basement, a foundation for the building, for the next, for the building's life cycle.
No, I fully agree. Right now, if you are able to measure, you can understand where you are, and you can foresee your goals, your challenge to improve. No? And I would like even to highlight the work that IC groups or ISO groups are doing to prepare standards worldwide in order to have a common benchmark, no? And BEAM, etc., etc. I think really this is a really good, because we have a common benchmark worldwide, and this benchmark is not frozen. This is improving, and for that reason, this legal framework or specification framework is helping to improve the situation. Okay, for that reason, with measurements, benchmark, plus new specifications more efficient, I think we are in a trend at least better.
So beyond a framework, more a flexible platform that could allow us to work with different frameworks depending on the situation, and always with this measurement and validation in place from transparency. Thanks. With this, I think that we have finished. I will try to summarize. Help me if I forget something. I think that that's buildings and buildings renovation and new construction, we all have agreed that is key to address climate change, and it's one of the low-cost climate actions we could undertake as for renovation. We have agreed that quality has to be redefined and redesigned, and has a key role to play in the new wave of green buildings that are going to increase the climate resilience of cities and communities. The innovation and digitalization when it comes to KPIs and measurement and validation, it's also primary in the use beyond life cycle of buildings, and that it affects not only our health and productivity, but it could touch from, luckily, from poverty to energy infrastructure or any objective that has to do with climate change. So let's keep being ambitious, and let's go for a better world thanks to our buildings.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a la moderadora, a Maya Zelaya, también a Kai Kilman, a Ignacio Cubiñá y a Manuel Járrega por sus interesantes aportaciones y reflexiones que nos han hecho pues, en este primer panel, que ha dado pues, el impulso a esta FINIU que ha empezado pues, esta mañana. Durante esos 4 días les acompañará esta semana que dedicamos en Barcelona a la Barcelona New Economy Week. Ha sido interesantes las reflexiones